And we are live. Welcome everybody to Lubbock Compact Live for Wednesday, June 23rd. It is a hot one today. I'm Adam Hernandez. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Nick Bergfeld. We also have a special guest with us today, Mr. Cannon Roberts, and we will get to him, of course, later on in the show. But first, I just want to remind everybody to please like our Facebook page. Also, if you would like to help us out for free, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you really are feeling generous, then you can give us a like or a comment there. So, and as always, if you have any questions at any time during the show, please don't hesitate to put those in the Facebook comments. You can also put those in the Q&A on the Zoom. And we will go ahead and get started with this week's headlines. Dr. Nick.
Yeah, so for this week, there's actually a lot of things to talk about, and I don't even necessarily know if we'll get to all of them. Starting with actually yesterday's city council meeting. So a ton of things happened at the city council meeting, very important to the Lubbock citizenry because of the dollar amounts that are associated with some of the decisions that came down the pipe during this meeting. So yesterday, we'll start with the biggest issue as we move down. The first was the council looked at and moved forward with putting a bond election onto the ballot in November. So this will be for $147 million, $147.5 million, about 40 of that specifically for downtown renovations of Broadway and the Broadway Streets project, and the rest of it going to arterial construction for the most part, new buildings, some repair as well, throughout the city of Lubbock. And the council was very, very proud of this. They've spent a lot of time in trying to figure out how to put this document together. But if you are looking at this and asking the question, where are the resources going? That's something that we always look at. I would say one of the things that's a bit more concerning right now is when you see the distribution of where these dollars are going. One of the districts, the central part of the city of Lubbock, District 3, doesn't get nearly as much love as some of the other ones. And my assumption is that they really wanted to focus on new roads within this sort of strategy for the bond raise, except for the downtown component. And so to me, I would have liked to see something more of a balance there. But this is something that from a citizenry standpoint, people can feel differently about whether or not this is the time to invest in roads. For me, the way that I think about it, the city got feedback from its representative to the market, who found that the interest rate the city of Lubbock would get right now if we did a bond raise would be phenomenal. An excellent bond raise, and that our credit rating is excellent as well, and that the market would love to be able to buy debt from the city of Lubbock. And so it seems like a good moment just in terms of what interest rate we would get, everything like that. And on top of that, we haven't done a bond raise as a city of Lubbock in over a decade now. So there's a lot of misrepair and a lot of things that we need to kind of clean up. And so Adam, how do you feel about this? Lubbock citizens haven't voted on a bond raise in over a decade. This isn't something we do very often. This is a very, very large sum of money.
Yeah, my thoughts on this. I think of course it's good that we're going to be spending money on roads. There's definitely a lot of work to do there, a lot to be desired. But I think, just me personally, I would have liked it better if there would have been a longer process on this, if they would have took public input on this before they just kind of decided, what they were going to do a bond raise on. Because like you said, it hasn't happened in over a decade. There's roads, but there's all kinds of other stuff that could be done with that money. But I'm not exactly too mad, because at the same time, all of those roads do need to be repaired. So yeah.
And with that, when it comes to the road repair, one of the things that we've been following a lot with as the compact is dirt streets and the paving of dirt streets. And a really important initiative was voted on by the council at the city council meeting as well, which was to move forward with $42 million of what are called certificates of obligation. So these are debt like a bond raise, except that when the city uses this process, they don't have to have the citizenry vote to raise this debt. They can do it themselves by an act of the council, and they can back it. They can essentially back the debt that they're being lended. So they back the loan with future revenues from the city's general fund or through other parts of the city's revenues. So This one specifically actually says that it will be getting some of its payments from water fees. Some of the water fees will be diverted to paying for these. Now, the part that's exciting for us at the Lubbock Compact is that $9 million of that $42 million is being set aside specifically to pave about 8 miles worth of dirt streets in our community. The bulk of them, now it's not an overwhelming majority, but a significant amount of that financing is going to North and East Lubbock, who have the lion's share of the dirt streets in the city of Lubbock as well. And so you could very easily make the argument as to that's appropriate. And this has been one of the core issues that we've continued to advocate on since day one. And, Adam, seeing this vote, the $9 million now being allocated, the largest single investment the city of Lubbock has made in dirt street paving, as far as I'm aware, in its history.
Yeah.
What does that feel like?
Well, I got to watch this whole process play out from a very long way away. So I happened to be on a meeting for the Future Needs Committee. They were presenting to the council kind of their recommendations when this all first came up, which was a surprise in and of itself. I did not know that they were looking at doing, any more than they were already going to do for dirt roads, which in the last budget session, they had doubled the annual budget for that from 400,000 to 800,000, which we know isn't going to really do much of anything. I do want to, though, mention here that, yes, we were definitely advocating for dirt streets, and we did have a hand in this, but I also do want to recognize West Texas Organizing Strategies. They actually had an entire Zoom meeting where they called a bunch of stakeholders in. I think they had invited 3 of the council members, but I do know that the mayor was there, and I can't remember the other council member who was on there at the time. But there was 2 council members there, and they actually did ask them to commit to paving all of the dirt streets in Lubbock in 3 years. The mayor did not commit to that. The other council member, I can't remember their answer on that, but I do remember the mayor did not commit to that. And so when it came back up and they were like, we're doing this in 3 years, though it's not all of them, I think that may have been, definitely probably was a big factor in that, because West Texas Organizing Strategy, as we know, has been working in the community for a long time.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good shout out to West Texas Organizing Strategy. So WTOS, they really carried the torch for advocacy and activism in Lubbock for many, many years on their own. And it was a very difficult and lonely effort on their part to try to bring visibility to so many of the issues that we at the Lubbock Compact also focus on. So they were the first group to raise alarm bells about the Gateway Fund, which is this essentially roadway program, $100 million plus roadway program, entirely financed by utility fees on all of Lubbock citizens to mostly build roads in South Lubbock. And they pointed out how unfair that process was. They went to the city council, and this was, for Lubbock citizens interested in history, this was 7-8 years ago when they were going through this process. They had signage, they had graphs that they were showing, presentations. They really come there prepared to try to make the case as to why that structure, one, was unaccountable, because the city was raising enormous sums of money without any citizens voting or having a say in it. And then 2, because of the way that those dollars were being used. And so it's something that we've had to be part of that process to try to find reforms. And now, as we're coming into the 1-year anniversary of the Lubbock Compact, I do think one of the things we can hang our hat on as part of this sort of continuing the legacy of WTOS on this issue was getting the council to modify the Gateway Fund language so that now dollars from the Gateway Fund can be used for road repair and can be used for roads that are already built, which was one of the weird restrictions that had been baked into it initially, was that these dollars could only be used for new roads. Well, what does that imply about where those dollars are going to go? Not everywhere needs new roads. Most of the city of Lubbock just simply needs them repaired. So, I think there's even some aspect of a victory there. The last aspect that came out of the city council meeting with big dollar signs associated with it was the city council heard their first presentation on what they could use the American Rescue Act or Rescue Plan dollars for. So Lubbock in total is going to get $56,575,324 from this plan. We have actually already received, since June 8th, so a couple weeks back, Lubbock actually already got 28 million of those dollars. So a significant amount of those dollars are actually already in the city's bank account. Now, the conversations have been around accountability on how these dollars will be used. There's a lot of flexibility on how these dollars can be used in a community like Lubbock, because in a lot of the United States, the vast majority of these dollars will just be used to plug gaps in budgets and to plug financing that cities had to use for the COVID response. Now in Lubbock, we were very efficient in that way. And in the state of Texas, because of our property tax structure and our sales tax structure and the fact that we don't have income tax, those things all played a role in making sure that local government budgets in the state of Texas were not nearly as impacted in the same way as places across the United States that rely on income tax payments as a significant component of it. And so as a result of that, we have 56 million or so to think about as a community. It can be used for certain kinds of water infrastructure like sewage or water runoff or repairs of old plumbing that maybe has lead in it, things like that. It can be used to increase connectivity for broadband. That's both, it could be used to pay or subsidize broadband connectivity for folks in the community, for low-income folks in the community, or it could be used actually to invest in laying new fiber potentially to areas and grading and increasing essentially the megabit speeds that are available to parts of the city of Lubbock. And then finally, it can be used for economic development. And economic development is actually quite broadly defined in the way that the rescue plan says that it can be used. So the council actually has a lot of say. They have a lot of discretion in how exactly these dollars will be used. And so this presentation for them was the first one that they saw. You know, they asked a couple of questions, but from us, from an accountability standpoint, the most important one was when Councilwoman Patterson Harris asked the rest of the city council about whether they thought it would be a good idea to have what's called a blue ribbon committee work on the American Rescue Plan dollars. And so the idea with the Blue Ribbon Committee is that they help to guide a city council during a difficult decision, especially one where winners or losers will be picked in part of that process. And so it's something that you use where you bring in trusted leaders within the community, you bring in people from all over the city as well as experts. We have Texas Tech here, we should leverage our relationships there to come up with the best uses of how these dollars could be used. Right now, the council effectively has said that they're not interested in having a formal process for citizen input in how these dollars are used, although they promise that citizen input will be got. They have yet to actually say how that will be done. All that the other council members expressed during this meeting was that one of them said, Councilman Griffiths said that he wanted the dollars to be used for cybersecurity, and Councilwoman Joy directed city staff to essentially create wish lists of their departments and ask, look around and see what are the things that you wanted financed before in the past, and essentially put together these sort of lists of things that you would want to be paid for. Now, I'm sure city staff is going to come up with some great things that they think or believe should be financed and will be really great. But I ultimately believe that the citizens of Lubbock are going to be the best deciders on how to steward $56 million. You know, this is a windfall amount of money that even in the state of Texas today, is the process that we used for this bond raise, the certificates of obligation. The legislature actually just now passed legislation to prevent that kind of strategy in the future because citizens don't get a vote on certificates of obligation. And so they put a lot of restrictions now, actually, starting in September. City councils across the state of Texas will no longer be able to do what we're about to do with the certificates of obligation because of that. So there's a lot of questions about transparency, accountability, and how these dollars could be used. And, you know, Adam, as you're hearing all these things and thinking about it, I mean, as a Lubbock citizen, like what do you hope from this process?
I mean, what I hope, we pretty much already discussed that it's probably not going to go forward. And these are the kinds of decisions that just really keep me frustrated about the leadership in this city. And this is something that I think should be put to a vote of the people in some way, shape, or form. If that's a blue ribbon committee, or if that's, you know, some public hearings and you know, some other kind of committee, whatever that is. I don't like, that's one of the biggest things that has frustrated me with this council is that they just seem to want to take things up on their own and just do what they want to do, and as if they don't live in a city of 300,000 people. And it's just really frustrating. And I know I'm not the only one that feels that way. Yeah, it's just really unfortunate that they're not even open to that. It's not surprising to me at this point with this group. And yeah, so folks just need to be moved around. That's what I'll say. But yeah, I just don't trust this group with that much money.
Yeah. And it's something we continue to follow and watch, and we'll make sure that we keep Lubbock citizens informed about how this process unfolds, because we and you really should have input on how these dollars will be used. We're not going to see a $56 million stimulus injection into our community ever again, likely. And so this is a once in, not even a generation, but a once in 100-year scenario. And so we should be strategic and deliberate about it. Now, those were the aspects from the city council meeting, but this week has been incredibly busy, both here in the city of Lubbock, but then also in our sister city, the city of Wolfforth, just next to us, where their city council actually is in a bit of turmoil. So the mayor of Wolfforth, as well as the city manager of 11 years, as well as multiple city staff, actually all resigned in a brief period in time when all these issues came to a head. And it's coming at a critical moment in Wolfforth's history. The rapid expansion of the city into that area has caused for land value to increase and for there to be a lot of excitement about developments happening in the city of Wolfforth. Now, the challenge there is that Wolfforth only gets water from the ground. So unlike Lubbock, where we actually get nothing from under the city of Lubbock when it comes to our water supply, we are so diversified, we actually do not tap into the Ogallala under us as a city for our water utilization. Wolfforth is the exact opposite. They have no diversification. They actually have no access or water rights to anything. And not only that, but because of the size of the city that they are, it makes it very hard for them to raise the kind of money that Lubbock did to secure those water rights. And so all of these things are happening at the same time where a large developer announced the creation of 2,500 new houses in Wolfforth. This would effectively double the number of individuals that are relying on a dwindling water supply. The Avalanche Journal over this past week had two excellent articles, one related to water issues in Wolfforth and one related to water issues in South Lubbock that had a ton of overlap. Essentially, individuals who are taking water, groundwater from the Ogallala aquifer are rapidly depleting it. And not only that, but one of the challenges is that once that water is gone, those individuals, whether it be the city of Wolfforth or the new housing that's being built just outside of the city limits to the south of Lubbock, they will require water infrastructure and piping in order for them to get access to water again. If they don't, essentially the AJ talked about this in one community that's already run out of water to the west of us, where folks are essentially going out to, they're driving large trucks with 200-gallon tanks and filling them up and then driving them back to their homes and using that and having to do that once a week just simply to maintain it. And so what's ultimately going to happen here is that both in South Lubbock and Wolfforth, those are going to become Lubbock obligations one day. And it's going to be sooner rather than later that Lubbock citizens will likely have to pay or foot the bill for paying for piping to go into those areas because there really isn't any other way to get out of it. And so, when you think about these issues, Lubbock's relationship to Wolfforth, our relationship to developers who are essentially building just outside of the city limits with anticipating that those properties will get annexed by the city of Lubbock, it leaves a lot of concerns about the future of this region, as well as Lubbock's relationship to Wolfforth. And, Adam, as you're hearing this, how do you feel about, as you're thinking about water, as you're thinking about these different problems, water is such a big deal out here in West Texas.
Yeah, I've sat through some city council meetings, I think maybe one or two, where they were discussing Lubbock's water plans, and we get water from a couple of different sources now, which are lakes, basically. And so Lubbock has been focused on this for quite some time. I think that Wolfforth would do good to do the same, as they are, I'm sure. I think this just really highlights, once again, and for anybody out there listening, when we say the developer community, it's not to bash them. It's not to say that we wish the developer community would go away or that they shouldn't do what they do as a business. That is far from the case. The thing about it is, and what Lubbock, literally the thing that created Lubbock Compact was to get Lubbock to go into a different direction when it comes to development. Because this again highlights how unsustainable the pattern of development here in Lubbock has been. And time after time, when new things start to come online in Lubbock, where do they go? The same area over and over and over. That's more water, more water. So it just makes more sense, and people could still make money if they built in other parts of the city. And so I do hope that, I mean, it's going to force people to do it, but I do hope that this starts to kind of open some folks' eyes, or maybe give them a better understanding of what we're going on about all the time, because this is a big deal, right? And this is the biggest of deals, water. I mean, that's, you can live, what, 3 days without water? Right. So
it's pretty limiting, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. I mean, humans, unless y'all found something else that we can drink consistently and live off of, I don't know what you're gonna do. But yeah, that's just my thought. We have to stop this madness, because again, like you said, outside of the fact that they've used Gateway Fund dollars to build these streets out there that we're paying for in districts 1, 2, and 3, that we seldom see or use. On top of that, now you're putting in these future problems that, like you said, we're going to have to deal with. That's going to come to our plate because we're the big guy out here, right? So who else would they run to? And so it's just really frustrating, and I just hope it opens more people's eyes to understand what we go on about.
Yeah, and it's something that I think will unfold over the next coming years in this. And so, if Lubbock citizens hadn't thought too much about the idea of Wolfforth getting annexed into the city of Lubbock, gear up for it, because those conversations are going to really start in earnest, in the very, very foreseeable future. So that'll be it for the news for this week.
Yeah, and real quick before we bring Cannon on, I just want to give a shout out to an event that's coming up on this Friday. It's called the Unity in the Community Meeting. This is by Eastside Unity, Jay Shaw and the group over there. Eastside Unity, for those who don't know, is a Facebook group, but it's also kind of a platform where folks in the community can kind of communicate things and organize and things of that nature. So the group is called Eastside Unity, but the event is called Unity in the Community Meeting. This is to address some challenges that are faced by that community. And so if anybody's interested in how they may be able to help East Lubbock, or if they just want to go and hear from the citizens about what's going on in East Lubbock and maybe get some ideas about how they can help, please feel free. It's this Friday, June 25th, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Estacado High School gym. And so all are welcome, and we'll be discussing community stuff. And I will be there giving a update on what Lubbock Compact has going on and things of that nature. So as we bring Cannon into the mix, if you're enjoying listening to the show and you want to support what we're doing, please consider donating. You can go to lubbockcompact.com/donate. Every single dollar that folks give us go to doing this work. A big part of that is this show, because a big part of our mission is to inform folks about what's going on and also let you know ways that you can get involved and make sure that none of this stuff gets away from you. So if any of that is helpful to you, or if you just support the Compact in general, please go to lubbockcompact.com/donate, and we appreciate every single person who does. So joining us today, of course, is Mr. Cannon Roberts. Cannon taught composition and rhetoric for 10 years at several different colleges in 3 different states before moving back to Lubbock and becoming a community organizer. He is currently the director of Rideshare to Vote Aware, a nonprofit that trains students and recent graduates how to be effective activists and organizers. Cannon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So can you tell the listeners a little about your background and just what brought you to Lubbock?
Yeah, so I grew up in Lubbock, graduated from Coronado High School, went to LCU, got my degree there, and then spent a whole bunch of years just moving around a lot. And so, kind of the highlights, I was up in upstate New York, going to Binghamton University for a couple of years, down in Central Texas, where I started my teaching career in the women's prison in Gatesville. That always there's always good stories about that. It's mostly about how good of students they were, but it's still surprising stories. Then to Oklahoma, started grad school in Stillwater, came back to Lubbock for a while, ended up in Clarendon, up in the Panhandle, taught at Clarendon College, taught at New Mexico Junior College for a couple of years, and then kind of got stuck in Lubbock. I was my stuff was in storage. I had to get out of New Mexico. I tend to make old white administrators mad, and so I had to get out of New Mexico. My lease was up. Put my stuff in storage. Was waiting to hear back from a couple of universities. Angelo State was one. It looked like UT Permian Basin was going to give me an offer. And that's when the governor put a freeze on all new state hires. And so I actually got a call from UTPB that was like, get to Odessa just now, as soon as you can. It was like 6:30 in the morning. And I started driving down there. By the time I got there, they're like, yeah, we had the paper like already worked up, but we couldn't get you to sign it. So they gave me a few online classes, but I was just kind of in Lubbock and I was like, okay, so what do? I am in my 30s living with my parents. Stuff is in storage. And there's no university in Texas that's going to hire me. And so I started a consulting company and got involved in the business community a little bit, found out that Lubbock, one of the things I really like about Lubbock is there's a great networking kind of community here. And so I ran into a friend from LCU who said, you got to come to my networking group. And when I kind of told her what I was thinking about maybe doing, and so like that gave me a deadline. And so I had to create this company and make a website and act like I knew what I was talking about. But basically I was just an English professor for businesses. I worked with a lot of sales teams and taught people like how to quickly write emails that could actually, convince people and change people's minds. Then I met Miguel Lavario. And I volunteered for his campaign. He was running for Congress, 19th District in 2018. And at first, I just wanted to help out. I just wanted to help his campaign. And then I realized like it needed a little bit of organization and a little more guidance. And one thing that I hadn't necessarily told a lot of people was in my mind, I was a really good campaign manager. And so I had been like, I've been political and like involved in politics for a long time. And I was like, man, there are some things that if campaign managers would do, especially in rural areas or West Texas, that they would see more success. And so I had the opportunity to step in and run his campaign. I did that for a year. I kind of worked on a couple of other organizations, community organizing type things, tried to get Lubbock United Neighborhood Association back off the ground, and was kind of ready to leave Lubbock again. Like nothing was really sticking, was ready to leave Lubbock. And then Tom Watson put his name on the ballot. And so I drove down to Abilene like the Saturday before Christmas to convince him to hire me, and was really like, okay, if I can't convince him, I am driving back and packing up my place because I got to go find a job somewhere. But so did that, and then got this job with Right Share to Vote Aware. And so Right Share to Vote Aware is it's the nonprofit arm of a group called Right Share to Vote. So Right Share to Vote is an LLC that coordinates with campaigns to give rides to the polls. And that's it, it's a very simple kind of mission that they have. And so they just help get people to the polls. And so we partnered with them during Tom's campaign. And so I believe they gave around 40 rides. I don't remember if that's like throughout Texas. Like there's a learning curve with this. Like, not a lot of people, especially older people that need rides to the polls, are real excited about some random person calling them and saying, hey, can we give you a ride? So we're working on, getting the name out there and like building that trust. So then Aware is the nonprofit side. And so what I specifically do is I train interns to be better activists and organizers. Y'all will probably agree that most activists and organizers, especially in Lubbock, we learn through trial and error. And like you just try something and it doesn't work. And so you try something else. And so what we're hoping to do is be able to train these students how to be better organizers and activists. And so it's a lot of communication. It's a lot of social media management, since that's the way we build campaigns online. And as well as kind of getting an inside look on things like fundraising and volunteer recruitment and different aspects that again, you don't really learn how to do it until you're in the middle of it. And you're in a campaign and you're like, okay, we got 3 things going on and I need people to go to them and I can't do it all. And so usually that's how you learn. So we're hoping to give them that knowledge before they actually, kind of jump into the deep end. And then we're hoping that they'll work in their own communities where they are. So that was a whole big long answer for what brought you back to Lubbock.
Yeah, no, and I definitely agree about the organizing. As most folks watching the show know, I jumped into this out of the blue last summer, and I was baptized in impact fees. So that's how. So I got to get in on something really fun right off the bat.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, from 0 to 1,000 miles per hour is what it was. But I did okay, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, you are right. Nick, you have a question for Ken?
Yeah, just because Ken, I know you're such a student of policy and politics, and so when I heard about rideshare to vote and the efforts with that, I'm kind of curious, where do you see these trends in community outreach and engagement and get out the vote strategies? Because a lot of folks are recognizing now that what we've been doing in the past has been quite stale, doing seasonal cycles or things like that. And I'm just curious, when you think about it, where do you kind of see this starting to go to? What's next level, right? And where do you think that goes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Partly because there are a lot of there's a lot of organizations that are still very dedicated to those old forms, and think like if we just keep doing it, and like the number I hear over and over again is 3%. Is like every time we run someone, every time we put in the answer, we gain 3%. So it's just a matter of doing it over and over again. But the fact is, like, Tom did much better. Like, I won't say much better, like Miguel did much better than the candidates in the past. Tom, we were able to bump him up by a few percentage points. But we're still talking, high 30s. Like, we're still talking, we gotta gain more than 10 points in order to get someone in the 19th congressional district. And 3% isn't going to cut it. That's not going to get there. And so there are groups that are thinking more creatively about voter engagement. And so with Aware, the motto that we use comes from Brian Stevenson, or it starts with him. And so Brian Stevenson talks about injustice prevails where injustice. I should have looked this up. I knew I was going to probably mention it. So he says, where hopelessness prevails, injustice succeeds. Maybe that's it. I'm probably messing it up a little bit.
That's good. No, that's good.
But it's still that idea. And then his solution to fix that hopelessness in order to bring justice is through proximity. And he said, you got to put yourself in proximity with these communities. And so at Aware, we talk about create proximity, build trust, inspire action. And so a lot of the groups and kind of the efforts that you've seen, they show up and they create that proximity very last minute. They do it right before the deadline. And then they disappear. And then they come back and they say, hey, we're hoping that we can inspire action and that you'll go and vote. And people are like, well, where were you? And so that's one of the things that we're trying to solve. So we are partnered. Rideshare to Vote Aware is partnered with Vote Riders that is working to help get voter IDs and help with that registration process. And so then from there, we kind of take over as Rideshare to Vote and help them get to the polls, remind people that the elections are coming, and build relationships. And so when they first started this in 2018, it's been a slow build that we've had. But one of the founders, took a lady to the polls in Dallas, and since then has taken her to every election since then. And so they build that relationship. She built that trust. Yeah. And so now, she's the one that shows up for this woman and makes sure that she gets to vote. And so the part that we're missing is that building trust. And so we are trying to do things. So one of the things that Rideshare to Vote has done is they've also been giving rides to the vaccines. And we have kind of a separate program called Ride to the Vaccine. And so it's a way, we already have the infrastructure, and we already have some of the volunteers, but it's a way to keep, to remain part of people's lives. And so I think that's really vital. And I think after we get a few cycles, people will start to trust us more. And so it's not just hey, this random person is offering me a ride to the polls. But I think that's really what Stacey Abrams did in Georgia, was build that trust. She said, okay, we need to create this proximity. I need to get in the community and start registering voters. But then she didn't run off and run for election, the first chance she got. And so she said this last cycle, now I got to stay here and I got to keep working with these people. And that's what builds trust. And so now that she's done that, when she asks people, hey, go vote for this candidate, they'll do it because they trust her. Or when she decides to run, they'll do the same thing. And so I think, I've kind of given several different answers, but so I think staying involved in the community is vital. That's what builds that trust. That's going to be vital. And we need more leaders like Stacey Abrams. We need more leaders who are willing to do the servant part of it, the service side of it, that's behind the scenes. You don't get a lot of credit for it. It's sometimes a very sweaty job because you just, whether you're in Georgia or Texas, you're going to end up moving things around outside. And so I don't know that we have a lot of those types of leaders. I'm going to rephrase that. I don't know that we have a lot of prominent leaders like that in Texas right now. And I think that is what can really make a change, whether it's on the municipal level, like you're talking about, where we can show that, look, we have people just willing to do the work. They've been involved in the community. And now that they've been involved, we're going to ask for your vote. We're going to try to inspire that action. Or if it is on a federal, state level, we can do that from every different level. But that service style of leadership, I think, is what we're really missing in terms of our society in general, but I will say specifically about policy and politics.
Yeah, I agree with that. This is something that I kind of noticed early on last summer when we were doing the we get out the vote things that we were involved in, just trying to inform people about the impact fee situation and different things that were going on. And at that time, I started to tell people that we need to do this all year. And as a matter of fact, Lubbock Compact has already at a couple of events now this year, has done that. But we do have plans to do that much more. And so totally agree with you there. And I just spoke to a group about this also, because coming out to vote once every 4 years, now that I've seen how all of this stuff works, is ridiculous. That is like, we are out of our mind coming out every 4 years, one time, and voting, and then going home. And I'm noticing in 1 month the amount of stuff that I'm having to go down to city council to advocate for, or to make sure that they know what the citizens want on that issue, or whatever the case may be, just in 1 month, let alone a year, let alone 4 years. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happens there, and if we're not minding the store, whoever is gets to do everything. Yeah.
Well, and what'll happen is that if you only reach out to people when there's a vote, and let's say more than 4 times a year, let's say, or every 4 years, let's say every 2 years, and you reach out to them, then people start to know, okay, when this guy calls me, he's going to be telling me to go vote, and that's it. And so I'm not going to answer. But if you actually create a relationship, if you're involved in the community like you're talking about, then it doesn't feel like it's constant because, oh, I'm talking to Adam, twice, 3 times a month, I'm seeing him at events. And then every, a long time from then, he's going to ask me, he's going to say, hey, did you hear about this, vote that's coming up? You should really go vote in it and support, whatever policy or person or whatever. And so, yeah, it's when we look at campaigns and we look at social movements like a marketing campaign. And that worked for a while. I think it kind of put us in this situation that y'all are talking about with some of our city leaders, that we've created this class of leaders, at least locally in Lubbock, that believes that they don't need to ask the citizens of Lubbock anything, that they're the chosen ones. They can make all the decisions because they had the money to be able to buy enough ads to put themselves in this position. And so that's not a great way of leading. One of the things, I was trying to remember where I said this. I said this recently, but one of the things that I think a lot about is the fact that, a lot of these developers and some of these city leaders are trying to get us to cut back on the parks budget. And that seems like such an obvious thing. Like, people love parks. Why would anyone suggest? Why would that be something, people that anyone suggests we cut back on? But the people that are suggesting that, including the leaders who are making the decision, including the city council leaders, have big houses. They have big backyards. They have pools. They don't need a public pool. They would never have a birthday party in a park. I remember when we first moved. So I was born in Austin. My family's from Hale County. But we moved back from Austin when I was 4. And, the first birthday we had was in a park because we lived what at the time was like, way out of Lubbock. It's 114th now. It was across from Coles. But at the time, like, nobody wanted to drive that far. Basically we were like south of Slayton the way people acted. But we lived in a little small rent house, when my dad got his first state job here. And so we had to go to a park and we had a party and I have this great memory of it. But the people making these decisions, they would never think to do that. They would never think to have those events in a park. And so they don't see the reason to spend all that money on it. And so we need to think about when we elect leaders or when we push policy, we need to think about these things. We need to think about who's pushing this idea and what maybe do they not understand, because money can really isolate you.
Right. And, I actually, this is such a great example of something I was thinking about this recently because Councilman Griffith was on the radio this morning. And one of the comments that he made during his talk, he was giving an update about the city council. And he mentioned about how worthwhile it was to abandon the Coliseum in the auditorium. And he said, now Lubbock citizens aren't even going to be sad about that anymore because we have the premier Buddy Holly Hall. And they have all these great acts and all these great things are going to be going there. But I thought that was so fascinating because he completely did not talk about the Coliseum at all, right? And that it wasn't that people were concerned that they would lose musicals or a Broadway show. They were concerned that the ABC rodeo wouldn't come here anymore. They were concerned that monster truck rallies wouldn't happen here, right? That the motocross and the dirt biking and all the other types of what I'm sure they consider to be lowbrow, types of entertainment and enjoyments or things like that. And there wasn't even really kind of even thinking that it's like, no, well, no one's even going to remember that because we have this premier performance hall facility now for Broadway shows. But there's a good amount of folks in Lubbock who don't necessarily enjoy those, but do enjoy other kinds of entertainment. And I just think that disconnect, it makes me think about that as you were talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that I talk about a lot is the disconnect. I've actually spoke to some of them. They just don't seem to get it, which is understandable. I mean, they don't understand what I mean when I say that they grow up in a bubble. And I don't know if they take offense to that. It's really not anything to be offended about. It just is what it is. Those of us from East Lubbock grow up in a bubble as well. Our bubble just is a little bigger, right? Yeah. We experience a little more of the city, but we still are in our bubble. And that's something that even I work to overcome as I meet more folks from other districts and things of that nature. So yeah, they just don't get it. Like you said, Cannon, when you have a huge backyard where like that is the park, like and you can like, dress it up however you want, right? Whatever the theme of the party is. Well, most people, regular old folks, got to go to Walmart, get however many decorations they can, and call the family and go to a park and call it a day, right? That's normal for us, but that is so outside of their experience. They don't know anything about it. And so when you tell them about this stuff, it's not a surprise that their eyes kind of glaze over and they want to go on to something else. So, yeah, and again, the same thing, like when I was young, my mom, when I was very, very young, my mom took us to monster truck rallies. And that was those are things that I remember to this day. And I know that those seats used to be packed. I believe the Coliseum held somewhere like 11,000, if I'm not mistaken. And so those seats used to be packed. My dad did take me to one rodeo. I'm not a big rodeo guy, but my dad took me to one rodeo. Same thing, seats were packed. I remember the circuses there. The circus was always packed. I can't remember one time I went to the Coliseum where they were having an event and the parking lot wasn't full. But again, yeah, they just don't know about this stuff. But let's get back to Cannon and some questions about Cannon. So, as the director of Rideshare to Vote Aware, you do work with a lot of interns.
Yeah.
And this is something that Lubbock Compact is very interested in. We do have some feelers going out and trying to get that going in some sense. So this is going to be something that's very Lubbock Compact.
I'm taking notes.
Selfish right now.
Okay.
But yeah, so what successes or failures have you experienced in that that maybe you wish other organizers knew, or maybe you knew about before you started doing that kind of work?
Yeah, so this is another, it's a good question, because it's another thing where I just kind of learned, by doing and by making mistakes. Since I had been teaching, college freshmen for 10 years, I knew that mindset, I understood those students. And so I think that helped me a little bit, but it's funny because even with, when I talk to people on the Rideshare to Vote side, on the LLC side of our organization, there is pushback when I try to explain, like, well, this is what, this is how the interns think, and this is what they experience. And the people that make up this organization, they're great. I love them. But their idea of college and school is just incorrect, and they'll even say, well, my daughter, such and such. And I'm like, no, ask her, how this actually works. And I guarantee you that things are different. And so, so one of the things that I do like to tell people when they are thinking about interns or volunteers, and so Lubbock Compact, I know this is a concern y'all have, and that is, like, you should expect about 70% of your volunteers or interns to like flake out and disappear. Like that is common. That is very common. And so I had kind of two different strategies with the two different campaigns that I ran. And so with Miguel's campaign, I would just continuously, ask them and try to like find other things that they could do and figure out how to utilize them. And I spent a lot of time, I would argue, wasted a lot of my time, like trying to get them to come on board when really they liked the idea of it, but they really weren't willing to commit. With Tom's campaign, I was like, 2 weeks, you're done. And so we had a base camp account, and I would get someone that said, okay, I want to be involved. And I would say, okay, come in, and this is how we start. And so we started all the interns on Tom's campaign, just making social media content. So I was like, look, here's some example designs. We had documents that they could pull information from. And which that part is really important too, is like giving them a process. So if you're not going to give them a lot of oversight, give them steps in a process they can follow, rather than just saying, I don't know, do it and see what happens. Because, and this is what I have to talk to some of the founders of Rideshare to Vote, is that our grading system is completely punitive. And the only way you don't get punished is by being perfect, is by getting 100%. And so what we have taught a lot of students is to not try. And that if they don't think they can do it perfectly, they should just not do it. And so I hadn't put that together with Miguel's campaign. And so I'd ask them to do certain stuff and just nothing would get done. And they really wouldn't have an excuse for me. And they'd just be like, oh, I just didn't do it. But then I realized like, oh, they needed a process. I needed to give them steps. So I'd bring them on, put them on our base camp, give them the steps and the ability to create content. It was just like, look, here's some examples. This is why this is good. And then ask them to create content. Not all of them wanted to do that, but I said, that's where everybody starts. Then we'll figure out a different place for you. And so if they hadn't done anything in 2 weeks, I kicked them off of base camp. We had a limited number of people to be on there. And I didn't spend a lot of time like trying to cajole them. And so what happened is I got this really good, intense group of like 10 interns that stuck with me the whole time, and just got to know each other and built relationships. And again, it's that relationship. So we built that trust, and then that inspired their action. So then with Rideshare to Vote Aware, we really fixed that problem. And so the way we were able to solve that problem of not getting the buy-in, of not necessarily getting the work, is we pay them. And so, that's obviously the best way to go about it, is like we give them stipends, and it's about $15 an hour that they'll end up doing. And so I'm very careful with their time, and make sure, like, as you can tell, I like to talk a lot. And so when I talk to my interns, 2-hour meetings are not uncommon. So if I have 2-hour meetings that week, I'm like, y'all only got 6 hours, to like work on all this stuff. So I'm going to make sure that my assignments don't overwhelm you. Now, Lubbock Compact can't really do that. You don't have the money to pay them, and that's fine. So if you like, I do think that's the best idea is to pay interns. We have this warped idea that like people under 25 should just work for free. I don't want to say we boomers have this warped idea that anyone under 25 should work for them for free and not complain. And, my dad would always get mad at me when I was high school, college, because I didn't have, I never got a manual labor job. And he would I remember he like tried to get me one putting in sprinkler systems like in yards. Like that is a hard job. And I had friends that had done it. They're like, you don't want to do that, man. And so I was able to sabotage it before they brought me on. But my dad was like so mad. And this was something he complained about like for a long time. And then I think I had like finished my master's. So I was like in my mid-20s, I was teaching for schools, and he brought this up, and my grandfather looked at him and was like, what are you talking about? You never had a manual labor job. Your brother did. You always worked at the architecture firm. And so that, that solved that problem. He quit bringing that up after he got called out. And so, but a lot of boomers do that. Like they just have this idea that like they didn't get paid until they were 34. And that, everybody else should quit complaining, but that's not the way it works. That's not the way it worked. But so paying interns is always kind of the best way to go. The second way to go, and this is what y'all can offer, is to offer experience or skills that they can't get anywhere else. So kind of, the dirty little secret about internships is that nobody wants to do them. And so the interns aren't super excited. On Tom's campaign, we had a communications director that worked with us through about half the campaign, who used to work at Fox 34. And he said that every semester they would get like 10 interns, and he would see about 2 of them on a regular basis. And the others just kind of fizzled out. And, they didn't have the kind of manpower or desire to like track down all these interns. And at the end of it, they're just like, hey, thumbs up, everybody. And so usually the businesses or the organizations offering the internships, they don't want to invest in them. And so they either just kind of let them fade away and not do anything, or they just give them the grunt work that anybody could do that doesn't take any amount of training. So for example, internships on a political campaign. People think that like being a political intern looks a lot better than being a political volunteer. The only difference between those two things is that the volunteer was able to give their time as they could, and the intern was forced to do the exact same thing for 20 hours a week. And so you don't really do much on political campaigns besides make phone calls, basically something that can be done by pointing. Like if you can point the steps out to them, that's not, they don't learn anything from that. But that's the way a lot of internships function. And so what we're trying to do along with paying them is giving them actual skills, giving them skills that do help the organization. So our aware social media pages are like the content we post on there is by our interns. And so our interns are going from, some of them more and more, the Gen Z have gotten rid of their social media. And so some of them like don't even have social media, and now all of a sudden they're getting their content in front of 2,000 people. And so like, for an organization like ours, that's not a lot of followers, but for them, they really like it and they get really excited about it. So we can offer that for them along with those skills. And so I think that's the way Lubbock Compact can kind of create their internship and think about how to pull people in is offer to teach them the skills that both of y'all have. Both of y'all have y'all are very knowledgeable, like you are very talented in your areas. And so you can teach them some of those things that they're not necessarily learning in their class, and then give them experiences and opportunities. And so, say, hey, if you'll come and be our intern, you're going to get to know a couple of city council members, and you're going to be able to network, and we're going to introduce you to the new, neighborhood planner. We're going to introduce you to bowling here. And so those are the ways that you can draw in interns without having to pay them. And then that way they'll be more excited to intern with Lubbock Compact, which might not get as much attention as like doing an internship on the Texas Tech University, and saying, I was an intern for this, VP or dean or whatever. So it's offering those skills and those opportunities that the others don't.
Makes sense.
Yeah. No, it's just, Cannon, it's, you can talk forever. I enjoy this. We could have you on sort of every time to have these conversations because you just think so deeply on these issues. And, one thing that we don't even have the time to even touch on in this conversation is the incredible work that you've done in connecting faith communities to activism and advocacy, and just how powerful that has been locally has been amazing. And I hope we can have you come back on in the future to talk about that more. But if you just want to say a minute or two on something like that, just to let people know, because I just think it's so innovative, and there's so few people that really can operate in that space.
Yeah, I can sometimes be short. I do have a TikTok account, and I try to stick with one minute. So I did tell Nick, I said, hey, I think the way we create change is by talking to the faith leaders. And Nick was like, never gonna happen, man. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go see what I could do. And so really, I had the idea, but really Jim Beck did the groundwork. And so Jim Beck and I started, and we started in Church of Christ because Jim's at LCU. My dad's a Church of Christ minister. I was raised Church of Christ. We started with our own community and started bringing them together and started having these conversations. And to our great joy and honestly a little bit of surprise, they started growing fast. There were certain churches that we didn't necessarily ask right away, and they got really offended. And we were like, hey, that's good. You want to come and have these conversations. Like, we weren't sure you were there, but that's great that you were there. And so, we've been having these truth and reconciliation meetings. They'll start up again in the fall. And it's just a great way to, well, really, I think the most powerful thing is that it had a lot of these white ministers that were in these bubbles that we've been talking about, listening to Black leaders in the community. And so my favorite event was at LCU in the Moody Auditorium. I think I counted a little over 60 people there. And I was able to talk to Miss Rose Wilson and Ms. Bergfeld, and they were able to tell their stories, and they have such great stories. And so these ministers being able to to hear that, I think, was really powerful.
Yeah, definitely. What Jim Beck is, and it was funny. I was thinking along these lines during the summer last year while we were doing all of this, and I think I was still charged up, or it was probably in the midst of impact fees, and I was charged up about it. And my mind just, I mean, I've done a lot of work with churches, just in my business over the years, and so I've been around the crowd, and I know there's a lot of great people in all the churches of Lubbock, and I was just thinking like, there's a lot of people in these organizations, right? Each one has their group of folks they go there all the time, and so you have this instant communication, this instant network. On top of that, I think that what it seems to be with churches a lot of times is they're like, oh, we don't want to get involved in politics, and I don't like when people kind of frame it that way, because what we're talking about is policy, and policy affects our lives. And so since the church is such a big part of a lot of folks in Lubbock's lives, I just figured this should be of importance to them, right? Like, so for instance, the impact fee thing, that could end up costing folks money. Like, so it just seemed like a no-brainer to me. And I think I actually made a couple of posts about it, one in the LC Public Forum and then one just on my regular page. And that's when I got made aware of the roundtable that Jim Beck and the rest were doing. Because I had just kind of posted that, like, why doesn't the church get involved in this? Not necessarily trying to bash them, but just like actually like trying to invite them into this activity. And one of the pastors who actually is in the roundtable, he said, hey, we're already doing this. And so I was super excited about it. Of course, I found out later on it was Jim Beck and all the rest. And so, yeah, great group. I think that's super powerful. So hats off to you guys for starting that off and getting that really going in a real way. But it's 8:01. Like we always say when we have our special guests who normally we do talk to many times before the show, we can sit here and talk for hours. But before we get out of here, Cannon, I'll give you a chance. Do you want to shout out anybody? Do you want to have anything to say to the people out there before we get out of here?
So honestly, I was gonna shout out my TikTok because, you know, I want to be a Gen Zer. But so I have a TikTok called West Texas Progressive where I tell stories. Yeah, I look up. I have a decent following. I'm not like I think you might be surprised, Nick. And so I started talking just about like policy, what it's like to be a progressive grassroots organizer in a rural area. And then that kind of went to what, like, well, talking about that, you have to talk about talking to evangelicals, like, you know, at large, like all the denominations. And so I started talking about that and giving tips about communicating with evangelicals and criticizing them a little bit. And people really loved that. And so now it's kind of a mix of, there's a little bit of preaching going on. There's a little bit of, giving suggestions and analysis. And then like last week, I just kept telling stories about the prison. I got locked in the private prison I taught in New Mexico for over 3 hours because they didn't check the visitor log before they started a lockdown drill. And so I would have preferred being locked in my classroom with my prison students. I got stuck with all of the non-essential workers, and that was rough. That was the hardest. I taught in prisons for, you know, about 2 years full time, you know, teaching quite a few classes. And the hardest time I've had in a prison was sitting there talking to all the workers. So
you are now followed on
awesome.
If anybody is watching that has a TikTok, follow West Texas Progressive. And so thank you, Cannon, for coming on the show. I would just like to remind everybody to please follow our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you feel so moved, go to lubbockcompact.com/donate, or if you'd like to volunteer, go to lubbockcompact.com/volunteer. Nick, anything before we get out?
No, other than to say, Cannon, please come back.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're gonna have Cannon. Yeah, we have several regulars that didn't know they were going to be regulars until they came on the show. So you're one of those.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we definitely have our list of regulars growing. But yeah, so thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Good night.